Okay, well, welcome back to Primetime. Really sorry about that. We're having some major technical problems here tonight. Fingers crossed now, things are going to be okay. We're going to return to my colleague Mark up in Cullyhanna.
Will you join us in the Quinn family home just outside the County Armagh town of Cullyhanna, where we're going to be talking to Stephen and Breach Quinn about their campaign for justice. Their son Paul was killed just over a month ago in a barn outside Castleblaney in County Monaghan. Now, the circumstances of his death are well known to many people, but there's a bitter debate about the identity of his killers and their potential links to the Republican movement and the IRA. What is clear here is the growing support for the campaign for justice for the Quinn family. We'll be talking to Stephen and Breach in a few moments. But first, here's Claire Murphy.
It's 6 weeks since 21-year-old Paul Quinn was beaten to death by a gang of up to 10 men in this County Monaghan barn, just a few miles from the border.
There is no Republican involvement whatsoever in this man's murder.
It's been 6 weeks of denials that the IRA were connected to the killing.
From the political point of view, I don't know what any of these individuals' past has been, but obviously it's been condemned by all the Sinn Féin representatives.
6 weeks of political obfuscation. But is the truth now beginning to bubble to the surface? This was the view of the IMC 2 weeks ago.
There were either members or former members of the Provisional IRA involved, or associates of members or former members of the Provisional IRA, and we haven't gone beyond that at this stage.
In the immediate aftermath of the murder, there were widespread suggestions that the death was connected with fuel smuggling activities. But Paul Quinn's family and growing numbers of supporters say the youth fell foul of leading local Republicans, and his death may have been a punishment beating gone too far.
The consensus in the area is that this young man had been involved with physical altercations with two different people, first about 3 months ago and secondly about 3 weeks ago, and that the connections that they would have led to him being threatened in order to leave the country, and he refused, and the result we know. After the first incident, a woman arrived at his house with a hammer, demanding to get at him and saying that he would be found in a plastic bag on the roadside.
This woman was reportedly the wife of a senior Republican living in the area. Indeed, supporters of the Quinn family stressed that this was a well-organised operation, as in total a gang of up to 24 men could have been involved between the farmyard and acting as lookouts along the road.
To be able to assemble that number of men, to organise that number of men for an operation like that could not happen, certainly could not happen without the knowledge of the IRA, and I don't believe it could happen without the input of the IRA.
Well, I'm certainly convinced that there is no political undertones involved in this tragic murder. The information that I've had myself from inquiries I've made, tentative though they be, indicates that no, there is no Republican involvement in this terrible incident.
Lord Laird has since named who he claims is the main suspect in the House of Commons, but Gardaí say they still need the local community to come forward with information to break the wall of silence protecting the killers. And with over 200 people turning up to a meeting of the family support group last night, a remarkable event in itself in this Republican stronghold, it seems the voices demanding justice for Paul Quinn are now getting louder and braver. But if the former defenders of a community while at war are now its oppressors, can the truth emerge, or will their stranglehold suffice?
Will you join us in the Quinn family home just outside the County Armagh town of Cullyhanna, where we're going to be talking to Stephen and Breach Quinn about their campaign for justice. Their son Paul was killed just over a month ago in a barn outside Castleblaney in County Monaghan. Now, the circumstances of his death are well known to many people, but there's a bitter debate about the identity of his killers and their potential links to the Republican movement and the IRA. What is clear here is the growing support for the campaign for justice for the Quinn family. We'll be talking to Stephen and Breach in a few moments. But first, here's Claire Murphy. And that was Claire Murphy reporting. Well, Stephen. And that was Claire Murphy reporting. Well, Stephen and Breach, Quinn, thank you so much for inviting us and welcome us to your house. Breach, I want to just start by reminding people this is not just all about politics. This is about the life and the death of a young man, a 21-year-old with his life ahead of him. Tell us about Paul.
Well, first of all, this has nothing got to do with politics. Nothing whatsoever. Paul was a young 21-year-old, full of life, always laughing and acting the fool and trying to make a cod of you if he could. But then he got into a couple of rows with different people around this area. And he stood up to them and they took his life for it.
And Stephen, this is no accidental death. This wasn't just a simple row. This was so well planned.
Yeah.
They lured him to his death.
Yeah, lured him to his death, that's right. And it was all planned because they had a plan to get him down to such a place where he was and to beat him to death and then get away without anyone seeing them, and all evidence disappeared and everything, you know. So it was well planned. It wasn't just something that was done that morning or day. It had been planned well ahead for the likes of it to happen, you know.
And Breach, when the reactions came out from certain people, they just said the word criminality. They said this was all about smuggling or something, a row over criminal proceeds. How did you respond, or how did you feel when that was said?
Well, I was very angry because I knew Paul wasn't a criminal. I knew why he was murdered. And very hurt by the people in top places that should have known better than to come out and say a thing like that. They didn't even know Paul. You know, they've said it and they didn't even know Paul. They didn't know us. Paul wasn't a criminal. I'm his mother. I wouldn't tell lies for him. I wouldn't tell lies for any of my children.
You said he stood up to people.
He stood up.
Who did he stand up to?
The IRA.
Stephen, you're convinced
Yes,
this was the IRA?
100% convinced. He stood up, he had a row a couple of times with a son of an IRA man. And then he had another row with another man in Cullyhanna who says he has nothing got to do with IRA. Well, I don't know whether he has or not, but after that then...
Do you know the circumstances in which his death was ordered, organised? Do you know who gave the order, who did this?
No.
How far does it go up in the IRA?
I don't know how far it goes up in it, but it got to do with IRA anywhere. Members, ex-members, or whatever you might like to call it. I don't know how far, it mightn't go up that far up the rank in it, but it was them that done it anyway. I'd be 100% sure of it.
Conor Murphy, who represents this area, is a Sinn Féin member. He says he's talked to the IRA and he believes their assurances that they didn't do it. How do you respond to that?
Well, Conor Murphy says he spoke to the IRA. He didn't speak to any other people in Cullyhanna. He only went to those that he knew. He's covering up for them. He knows them.